Hey all, Scott here from Art of the Genre, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about the base concept in Star Frontiers or any science fiction game of enemies or monsters in that case. I'm going to grab my notes here just because I jotted a couple things down, so I'm going to refer back to them, but the concept here, especially within Star Frontiers, but I think it spans all science fiction gaming, is that you're dealing with a limited base of monsters. Let's take Star Frontiers, for example, because that's obviously what we're talking about today. The enemy in Star Frontiers are the Sathar. And if you have a single enemy, it's very reminiscent of what I talked about when I was talking about gaming in Middle Earth. And in Middle Earth, you've got orcs and you've got goblins as a base. And that's pretty much it. You're going to get into some trolls at some point if you wanted to and you went up the system. And then, of course, there are dragons and the ring race and stuff like that. But they're just going to wipe you out. They're not something that you're going to get into a lot. So really the basis of the game is revolved around just fighting orcs and goblins. You can vary those things, but that's what it is. It's even worse in Star Frontiers because you have the Sathar. And that's really it. You could certainly fight other humans or Vrusk or Yaz or Dralicites, but they're frontier races. And if you're fighting them, they're either going to be pirates or mega corporations or something like that. If you're fighting mega corporations, pirates with just a few races that are actually playable races, then you're basically playing Shadowrun or Cyberpunk. And you do not want Star Frontiers or a space opera game to be Cyberpunk. If you want to play Cyberpunk, you play those games. You do not play Star Frontiers. So you can't really fall into that either. So you've got this one thing, this abstract Sathar, which they try to keep the most information about them away from you that they can. And if you run into a Sathar, they're few and far between unless you're basing an entire concept of a campaign around them. So that leaves you very little to fight with. What TSR did was make this an exploration game. So if you go to different worlds, you might run into some different races or some different beasts or creatures on those planets, but they're not an existential threat. They're just something you find right then and deal with. And so it's one of those things that I always came into it because I think people who play games typically want some kind of a threat. So I was always looking to install something in Star Frontiers that was like that evil or that, a power, something greater than what the Sathar represented, but I could never really wrap my head around the concept of what I wanted to do with it. And then last week when I did my first campaign series YouTube, one of the viewers by the name of Locksmith came up with a fantastic theory that I hadn't really gone into conceptually. And that is that the way people play games, the reason that they want to continue to go back to Dungeons and Dragons, I gave various courses of why I thought that was versus science fiction. And one of the things that he said was, maybe it's because of the myth or folklore system built into our DNA as humans, that we are intrinsically looking to defeat the things of our nightmares or the things of our history or our myth or our folklore. Goblins. Then you defeat those and you can go to Tolkien's orcs. And then you defeat those and you go to an ogre or a troll. And those are things that come into our myths. And then if you're getting really powerful, you can go after the giants. And, D&D did such a great job creating a plethora of giants to fight from hill to storm. And then if you really become epic, your final, achievement unlock there would be to fight a dragon. And I think that's something that's just steeped in who we are. And I was thinking about this as I was looking through it. I was like, one of my concepts of why people go back to Dungeons and Dragons was the concept of a dungeon. And I talk about that in my other video if you go back and look at it. But I never really made the correlation to the fact that it's also the dragon. And I'm sure that Dungeons and Dragons was created, that title was created because it was catchy. D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, it rolls off the tongue. But I don't know that anybody really understood how powerful those two things are, the concept of the dungeon and the concept of the dragon. And that brings people back again and again. And sir, you can say the Star Frontiers. And you can look at that in exploration standpoints, but it's not something that makes us giddy on the inside to try to get more and more. Like if you explore a planet, you explored them all. Yeah, they all vary. You can do, a lava planet or a planet with a bad atmosphere or, what, but it doesn't, you don't want to do it necessarily again and again because they're not bringing any concepts that I think are as exciting as going in and getting that treasure hoard or saying, I beat a dragon. I think that's just something within us. So that was one of the things that I looked about. I was looking at the myths and trying to understand the concepts of what motivates players within science fiction or specifically within Star Frontiers. Like I thought if you went out and killed 1,000 Sathar, or you killed 1,000 stormtroopers, or you killed 1,000 xenomorphs from Alien, it will never give you the satisfaction of taking down a dragon. I don't know why that is. I just think it's in our head because it's something that we're innately, indoctrinated into in our mythology. And therefore it has a steeped basis to it. So when Locksmith told me that, and all I could think about it then was that is the concept. And he brought up going in and making fauna or flora or some kind of primer that would give you more than just that one random encounter on a planet that might be tough, but something that is the lore of the system of Star Frontiers, something that you never got, something that would equate to those type of mythical beasts. And even if they're not our folklore, if you indoctrinate players in Star Frontiers enough with these 4 or 5 great beasts or great accomplishments, something that starfarers or people could say, I saw one of those once. Kid, you never want to see one of those. Because as soon as somebody says that, the first thing the players want to do is run out and find one. And if they can overcome it or kill it or subdue it or whatever the case may be, they have a story to tell. And if people understand in a book form or many, many different game masters have this creature or these certain creatures, then that's passed along throughout the entire mythos that you're creating within Star Frontiers, and people can say, I did it. I got one of those things. And I think that's epically important because just like I talked about in the other video where you're talking about levels and experience and the different modus operandi that make people go back to Dungeons and Dragons and how you can try to mirror that in Star Frontiers, I think this is paramount too. I think we need, as a frontier society, to make things that people will understand and have hard stats on, that therefore you can bring into your campaigns. And when we start an organized play for this, which I promise you we're going to do, you can have people talking or discussing things, and when someone brings up something like a Trask, everyone knows what it is. And they all know how tough it is. And they all know how hard it is to bring down. And that builds community. And unless you build community within Star Frontiers, the game peters out. You can put out 1,000,000 Zebulon's Guide or 1,000,000 Star Frontiersmen or 1,000,000 Frontier Explorers to give people information. But unless there's a bound community of players, you're shotgunning it out there into oblivion. And I believe that the circle that is Star Frontiers gameplay continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. So unless we come together and start talking about things and building things within a community basis that we can all wrap our heads around and we can all use, then I think a lot of what we do is just tilting at a windmill. So that is my initial concept here. I don't want to take up too much time on it, but I'm looking to create a primer of, let's say, 15 really cool space-aligned creatures, be they planet bound that could somehow get from planet to planet, or something that could get from planet to planet. Those are the things that we're looking for, or I'm looking for. If you have some suggestions for me, or you have some things that have worked in your campaigns, or an evil or a menace that have worked in your campaigns, obviously I think there needs to be something other than Sathar. You cannot have one threat that's a little Weasley worm creature that you just don't understand. It's not bad enough. I make them bad, but they're not bad enough. You don't have the Klingon Empire or something else out there that is pushing against the frontier, or something in the horror genre that can be pushing against the frontier, which is something that I would like. So that is something that I want to incorporate. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on enemies, or any cool concepts that you might have that we could incorporate into an organized play in year one. Something that would give us opportunities, or something that could even be incorporated into Zebulon's 2. So give me your concepts if you have them. I'd love to hear how you deal with enemies within Star Frontiers that are not frontier races, and not megacorps, and not Sathar. And not something that you've stolen directly out of another IP. Oh, I put aliens in. Okay, well, that's not going to help me. It has to be something else that works within the Star Frontiers genre. So that's my challenge to you today, as we're talking about enemies and their concepts within the Star Frontiers universe. Hopefully you'll see what we have here in this video and comment below. And otherwise, as I always say, great gaming.